April 14th, 1912. 11:40 p.m., the North Atlantic is black as ink. Breathe. Deadly cold. And then, a lookout's voice pierces the night. Iceberg! Right ahead! But this moment, this catastrophic collision that would claim 1,500 lives, it didn't have to happen. Because for hours, no, for days, warnings poured in, 7 ice warnings, 7 chances to change course, 7 opportunities to save the unsinkable ship. This is the story of the Titanic and the warnings that were ignored. April 10th, 1912. Southampton, England. She was magnificent. Nearly 900 feet long, 46,000 tons of steel and luxury. The RMS Titanic, the largest moving object ever built by human hands. First-class passengers strolled decks lined with mahogany and gold. They dined beneath crystal chandeliers. They believed they were aboard something more than a ship. They believed they were aboard the future. The White Star Line had spared no expense. This wasn't just a ship, it was a statement, a symbol of human achievement, of progress, of invincibility. Captain Edward Smith stood on the bridge. At 62 years old, this was his final voyage before retirement. The millionaire's captain, they called him, respected, experienced, decorated with decades at sea. But even experience can be corrupted by one dangerous thing, overconfidence. As Titanic steamed away from Southampton, passengers waved from the railings. They had no idea they were sailing into history for all the wrong reasons. The ship carried 2,224 souls, millionaires and immigrants, families chasing dreams, young couples on honeymoons, and enough lifeboats for only 1,178 of them. But that didn't matter, because Titanic was unsinkable, wasn't it? The first warning arrived from the steamship Coronia. Bergs, growlers, and field ice in 42 degrees north from 49 to 51 degrees west. The message was delivered to Captain Smith. He read it, acknowledged it, and posted it in the chart room. But Titanic didn't slow down. 1:42 p.m., a second warning, this time from the Baltic. Greek steamer reports passing icebergs and large quantities of field ice. Captain Smith showed this message to Bruce Ismay, the managing director of White Star Line. Ismay casually pocketed it. He wanted to show it off to passengers over dinner, proof of the adventure they were on. The warning stayed in his pocket for 5 hours. Still, Titanic didn't slow down. 1:45 p.m., another warning from the America. Ice spotted directly in Titanic's path. This message never made it to the bridge. The wireless operator was too busy sending personal messages for wealthy passengers. 5:30 p.m. The temperature dropped sharply. The officers felt it. They knew what it meant. Cold air, ice nearby. But Captain Smith was at a dinner party in the first-class dining saloon hosted in his honor. This was his retirement voyage, after all, a celebration. 7:30 p.m. 3 more warnings came in rapid succession, from the Californian, from the Mesaba, all reporting massive ice fields directly ahead. The Mesaba's warning was chilling. Much heavy pack ice and great number large icebergs. Also field ice. It was the most specific warning yet. It pinpointed the exact location, right in Titanic's path. But the wireless operators were overwhelmed with passenger messages. The warning was never marked as urgent. It was never delivered to the bridge. 7 warnings, 7 opportunities. And still, Titanic steamed ahead at nearly full speed, 22 knots, racing through the darkness. Captains believed that in clear weather with good visibility, lookouts could spot icebergs in time. And third, there was arrogance. Titanic was built with 16 watertight compartments. The ship could survive 4 of them flooding. It was designed to be unsinkable. Even the trade magazines said so. Why worry about ice when your ship cannot sink? Captain Smith had sailed these waters for decades. He'd navigated through ice before. He trusted his crew, he trusted his ship. But there was one thing he didn't account for. The night of April 14th was not a normal night. It was a moonless night. No moonlight to reflect off the icebergs. and the sea was eerily calm, no waves crashing against the ice to reveal its location. The lookouts in the crow's nest had another problem: no binoculars. They'd been locked in a cabinet, and the officer with the key had been reassigned before the ship left Southampton. So 2 men stood 50 feet above the deck, straining their eyes into pitch-black darkness, searching for white ice against a black ocean. At 11:00 p.m., Captain Smith finally retired to his cabin. He left Second Officer Charles Lightoller with instructions: if conditions became at all doubtful, let him know immediately. But what did doubtful mean? Lightoller wasn't sure. So he did nothing. First Officer William Murdoch took over the watch at 10. He knew about the ice warnings. He knew the temperature had dropped to freezing, but he also knew the captain's orders: maintain speed. And so Titanic charged forward, through the night, through the warnings, through the ice field, at 22 knots, straight toward disaster. 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet stood in the crow's nest, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. His eyes ached from staring into the darkness, and then he saw it: a shape, a shadow. Growing larger, an iceberg, directly ahead. He grabbed the warning bell and rang it 3 times. Then he picked up the telephone to the bridge. "What did you see?" the officer asked. "Iceberg, right ahead." On the bridge, First Officer Murdoch reacted instantly. He ordered the helm hard to starboard, turning the ship to the left. He ordered the engines reversed. But Titanic was massive. She didn't turn quickly, 37 seconds. That's all the time they had from the moment Fleet spotted the iceberg to impact. For a few agonizing seconds, it seemed like they might make it. The bow began to turn, almost, and then a grinding, tearing sound. Not loud, not dramatic, almost gentle. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side of the ship, below the waterline, for just 10 seconds. Passengers barely noticed. Some thought they'd dropped a propeller, others joked about it. A few even picked up chunks of ice from the deck to put in their drinks. But down below, in the ship's belly, it was chaos. The iceberg had opened a 300-foot gash along 6 compartments. Water poured in, not in one catastrophic flood, but in steady, unstoppable streams. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, was summoned immediately. He inspected the damage, he did the calculations, and then he delivered the verdict that no one wanted to hear. The ship will sink. It's a mathematical certainty. Captain Smith couldn't believe it. How long? Andrews looked him in the eye. An hour, 2 at most. The Unsinkable ship was sinking. April 15th, Captain Smith gave the order: uncover the lifeboats. But there was a problem. The crew had never conducted a proper lifeboat drill. They didn't know how to load them. They didn't know how many people each boat could hold. And the passengers? Most of them didn't believe the ship was really sinking. "This is the Titanic," they said. "It can't sink." So when officers tried to load the lifeboats, passengers hesitated. Why leave the warm, brightly lit ship for a tiny boat in the freezing darkness? The first lifeboat launched at 12:45 a.m. It had a capacity of 65 people. It left with only 28. One by one, the lifeboats were lowered, half full. Some less than half. Officers were afraid to load them to capacity, worried they might buckle. Meanwhile, the Titanic's wireless operators sent out desperate distress calls. "CQD, CQD, SOS, we are sinking fast, passengers being put into boats." The closest ship was the Californian, less than 20 miles away, but her wireless operator had gone to bed. He never heard the call. Another ship, the Carpathia, picked up the signal. Captain Arthur Rostron immediately turned his ship around and pushed the engines beyond their limits. But the Carpathia was 58 miles away. It would take 4 hours to reach Titanic, 4 hours, and Titanic had less than 2. By 1:00 a.m., the bow of the ship was noticeably lower in the water. Panic began to spread. By 1:30 a.m., officers were forced to fire warning shots into the air to control the crowds. Women and children were loaded first. Husbands kissed their wives goodbye. Fathers handed their children into the boats, knowing they would never see them again. John Jacob Astor, one of the richest men in the world, asked if he could join his pregnant wife in the lifeboat. He was refused. He stepped back calmly and lit a cigarette. The band continued to play, even as the water rose, even as the deck began to tilt. They played ragtime, waltzes, hymns, anything to keep people calm. By 2 a.m., the stern of the ship began to rise out of the water. The bow was completely submerged. People clung to railings. They slid down the deck. They jumped into the freezing ocean, water so cold it could kill in minutes. At 2:18 a.m., the lights flickered and went out. The ship was plunged into darkness, and then a sound that survivors would never forget. A deep, thunderous roar as everything inside the ship, furniture, engines, boilers, grand pianos, crashed forward. At 2:20 a.m., the Titanic broke in two. The stern rose vertically into the air, suspended for a few impossible seconds, and then it slid beneath the waves. The Unsinkable ship was gone. Over 500 people were left in the water, screaming, begging for help, but the lifeboats, barely half full, rowed away. Officers feared that desperate swimmers would swarm and capsize them. Within 20 minutes, the screams stopped. The ocean fell silent. The water was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Most people died of hypothermia within 15 minutes. The Carpathia arrived. Her crew searched the darkness with spotlights looking for survivors. They found lifeboats. 705 survivors, cold, traumatized, broken, but over 1,500 were gone, swallowed by the sea. As news of the disaster spread, the world was stunned. How could this happen? How could the Unsinkable ship sink on its very first voyage? The answer was painfully simple: arrogance, overconfidence, ignored warnings. 7 ice warnings were sent, 7 chances to slow down, to change course, to avoid disaster. But speed was prioritized over safety, reputation over caution, profit over people. The Titanic didn't sink because of one mistake. It sank because of a series of decisions, small, seemingly insignificant decisions, that compounded into catastrophe. The missing binoculars, the ignored warnings, the lack of lifeboat drills, the pressure to break speed records, each one on its own might not have mattered, but together they were lethal. In the aftermath, the world demanded change. New regulations were passed. Ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for everyone. 24-hour radio watches became mandatory. The International Ice Patrol was created to monitor icebergs in the North Atlantic. These changes saved countless lives in the decades that followed. But for the 1,500 who died that night, the changes came too late. The Titanic lies 2.5 miles beneath the ocean, in the darkness, in the cold. A monument to human ambition and human folly. We remember her not for what she was, but for what she taught us, that no ship is unsinkable, no system is foolproof, no warning should ever be ignored, because sometimes the difference between disaster and survival is simply listening. This was Titanic, the warnings that were ignored, and the some 500 souls who paid the price. Very end.